Coming to you from the city of the weird. Exploring topics from the esoteric and unexplored to dimensions unknown. Shining a light of truth on the darkest corners of our reality. Welcome to the Curious Realm. Well, hello everybody, and welcome back to this episode of the Curious Realm podcast. Chris Jordan here, coming to you from, well, Austin here, but I am in Las Vegas right now. Our guest in this segment is Bill Soukoulas. We will be talking with him about his book, Bridging the Tragedy. It is a book about the paranormal events leading up to the fall of the Silver Bridge and basically the beginning of what we know as the phenomenon known as Mothman. Welcome to the show. Bill, how are you today?
Good, Chris. How are you? Happy New Year.
Happy New Year to you too as well. Thank you so much for being able to come on so close to the new year and for having the time. I know you guys have been slam-packed with interviews lately with the book and all that kind of stuff.
Life's been interesting and the holidays are just wrapping up. So happy to make time for the show. Always happy to talk.
Well, I am greatly appreciative. I have been wanting to, for years, even before we rebranded as Curious Realm, back when we were three people sitting around a table, I have been wanting to do an actual episode about Mothman. But one of the things I've always wanted with this show was not to just sit around and talk about something, but talk to actual researchers, find out. And you are one of those actual researchers. Let's get into real quick, Bill, how it is that you and your wife came into the world of Mothman, how you came into studying the paranormal instances that occurred around that time.
So I've been interested in the paranormal for years and years. I mean, really, since about 1977, 78, there was a TV show back on Sunday nights called Project UFO. And it was like a spoof type of a documentary format where they talked about, alien abductions, UFOs, things like this, which I didn't even know anything about because when the show came on, I was probably 10 or 11 years old, but I knew I was fascinated by it. And so for the next, I guess it was probably almost 30 years, I would spend time, reading things, J.R.R. Tolkien, Robert Heinlein, Michael Moorcock in the early days, and then got more into Stephen King with the horror genre. And then kind of got, life got in the way. And one day I was actually watching a video of the Mothman prophecies. I'd never heard of Mothman prophecies in the past, but the movie was interesting enough that I didn't forget it, and I kind of filed it away, and I thought about it from time to time. And then maybe a year or two later, I went out and I bought the DVD, and I watched the movie again, and that just really kicked off my interest in the whole Mothman prophecies phenomenon. I got the book by John Keel and a bunch of other books that were related to the whole thing, and really for the next almost 20 years, dedicated a whole lot of my spare time to learning more and more and more about the Mothman, about John Keel, and about anything closely related to that whole story.
It really is one of the, I guess, points of American paranormal Americana. It's not like it's a story that came over from the whole world, or a tradition that came from somewhere else. This is uniquely, or even something that, like Jersey Devil or something like that traces itself back for hundreds of years. This is a pretty modern phenomena, correct?
Relatively speaking, yes. I mean, there have been reported instances of flying humanoids and winged creatures going back, really towards the dawn of time, but never anything really as definitive as what happened in Point Pleasant, West Virginia between 66 and 67. And just to give a broad overview of that, between 100 and 200 people came forth and basically gave their testimony either to paranormal researchers, like a gentleman by the name of John Keel, who wrote the Mothman Prophecies book, or Gray Barker, who was a contemporary. Even different police officers within that community were really bombarded by different reports. And mind you, this is a very small community. Point Pleasant, around 5,000 people. And then right across the river, the Ohio River, Gallipolis, which is only slightly more populated than that. So you're thinking 11 to 12,000 people, close to 200 reported sightings. Something was going on.
Yeah, precisely. And enough that local police, like you said, took more than one report. It's not like they were dismissing people when they called up and said something.
No, absolutely. In fact, the first major Point Pleasant area reporting of Mothman was by a couple of young married couples, Roger and Linda Scarberry and Steve and Mary Millette, who were cruising around in an area about 10, 11 miles north of Point Pleasant on Route 62 in an area called the TNT area. It's like a wildlife preserve that was really built upon the foundations of an old TNT manufacturing facility that was utilized back in World War II times. So they were just out kind of doing what kids do, cruising around. It was late at night, midnight, thereabouts. And all of a sudden they saw this creature that scared them half to death. They got into the car, they hightailed it down 62, headed towards Point Pleasant. And this creature, which they described as having black wings, flying like a bird without flapping its wings and piercing red eyes, followed them all the way to Point Pleasant. And when they gave their testimonies, Deputy Millard Halstead, who was the gentleman who was on duty at that time, basically stated, these kids are not the kind of kids that get in trouble. They're not the kind of people that make things up. They saw something. What it was, we don't know, but they definitely saw something. And other folks who came forth over the course of the next 13 months were given the same kind of reverence because they were very, very credible people.
Yeah, once again, it's not a big city type of town. I had the pleasure of hanging out numerous times this last year with King Gerhardt, who I know you mutually know, and he was up at the Point Pleasant Festival, and he was telling me the same thing. The fact that it reminds me, at least hearing of it, of the small town Mamou that my family's from, one red light, like small enough that on a Sunday edition of the paper, you will see everybody who was arrested that week and what they were arrested for.
In one paragraph.
Like in the newspaper.
Yep. Absolutely.
That's what kind of small community it is. But whenever Mardi Gras happens, that small community grows to about 15,000 people. Like it's a movement that goes on to this small place that is the quote home of Cajun music. So very much the same thing in Point Pleasant, where whenever the Mothman Festival goes on, it is all hands on deck for that tiny little town.
Absolutely. We had the pleasure of presenting at the Mothman Festival this year. It's the first time Jackie and I have attended. We'd been invited to go to the previous two to talk about our book, which wasn't published yet. So the timing worked out perfectly well, but the project was underway. And we had the opportunity to have our book signings taking place, right across from Ken Gerhardt and Lyle Blackburn and Nick Redfern. So it was cool to be there. I mean, we really enjoyed it. And this year, usually the festival would draw about 15,000 people. They said that the festival drew about 30,000 people this year from the pent up desire of the masses to get to Point Pleasant. They couldn't go the last couple of years because of the pandemic.
Yeah, absolutely. I saw the same thing. I work in the world of corporate AV, putting on events, things like that. And I saw the same thing. Things have kind of tapered off a little bit, but everybody was going huge and whiz bang coming out of the gate last year because they'd had 2 years with no conferences. Mm-hmm. So they were like, we've been holding on to this budget. Let's get rid of it and let's throw something crazy because nobody's been able to get together for this kind of stuff.
Right.
And even with that in mind, how many people while you were there did you hear from that had experiences? How many locals did you speak with that had experiences with the Mothman?
Well, during the actual festival itself, we were so focused on basically manning the booth and talking to people about the book and frankly selling the book that it was challenging to be able to get out and really have conversations with people that we would have liked to have. But the interesting part of what we've found since 2016, Jackie and I have been going to Point Pleasant on a regular basis, and we've made friendships with people who have been close to the Mothman phenomenon for many years. And so we were able to have conversations with folks over the course of the last 6 years who could tell us really what the timbre of the conversations were and what Mothman did to the community, what the feelings were like, what the vibe was like during that time. We've been able to pick that up. We had a couple of people that we interviewed for the book, one of whom actually attended the festival with us, who did have experiences. And he and a lady he wrote about in some of his books, they both gave us some good testimonies as to what their experiences were like. The rest of the folks that we interviewed talked primarily about the bridge disaster and how the bridge disaster affected them and the community at large.
Well, let's start getting into that, because that is really, I think, a crux point that brought this to a whole new level, and even brought it to a whole new level to the locals. It was one thing to be having sightings, things like that. But when the bridge collapse happened, I think that was a point that really kind of freaked a lot of people out, let's just say. So let's start getting into the paranormal activity that was coming to a head prior to, and exactly what led up to the collapse of Silver Bridge.
So for the 13 months that transpired between the earliest sightings and when the bridge collapsed on December 15th of 1967, there were all kinds of reports of anything you can imagine from a paranormal standpoint. Obviously, Mothman was the major one, because Mothman is the one that gets all the publicity, and that's why we're talking now. And like I like to tell people, and it's one of the liner notes on our book, the Mothman and the legend of Mothman brought us to Point Pleasant, but it's the people of Point Pleasant that keep us coming back. So bringing us into Point Pleasant and learning about what happened for those 13 months, not only were there Mothman sightings, there were all kinds of UFO reports. In fact, from what I've been told, the UFO reports actually outnumbered the Mothman reports. So we had all kinds of reports of, unidentified aerial phenomena. There were men in black that showed up that tried to silence witnesses. There were other men in black, some of them, according to Carolyn Harris, who ran the Mothman Diner for many, many years. She told us there were two types of men in black that were in town. One type was obviously government men. We knew what they were doing there. The other ones were the other folks. And she just kind of alluded to the fact that they just seemed really, really strange. So two types of men in black, Mothman, UFOs, lights in the skies, poltergeist phenomenon. There were cattle mutilations. There was even a cave full of human skeletons found during this time as well. Yeah, that's one that's not very well known. But there was all kinds of stuff going on for those 13 months.
Wow. And did they track anything down from the origin of the skeletons, the age of them? Were they that's just a wild random nugget to throw in there, Bill?
It's a bizarre. It is.
That is bizarre.
I almost held it back, but I figured I'd throw it out there too. From what I understand, John Keel talked about this to a certain degree. And then Andy Colvin, who has chronicled a lot of John Keel's work for the last decade, has also gone on record to basically state that there was some type of a serial killer on the loose. Wow. And the legend or the scuttlebutt basically was that the people in the community and the authorities knew who it was who did it, and he was somebody who would be locked up in an asylum. So when he was locked up in the asylum, nothing else happened. When he was released, there would be more people that were reported missing. Now, he was from a very prominent family, so there was never any prosecution that was done. They tried to contain it by keeping this guy, locked up in an asylum, which is really kind of a bizarre thing. You would like to think things like this didn't happen, certainly not today or 55 years ago.
Wow.
But that's the book. Yeah.
That is some straight Jack the Ripper. Like,
oh yeah, absolutely.
that is wild stuff to hear, and once again to hear that it butts up against these sightings, these paranormal instances that were happening. That is just really high strangeness going on in a very small place. It'd be one thing if it was like, the state of Texas and all that stuff happened in a year. It'd be one place if it was Houston, 4 million people and growing. It's not LA. It's not New York. It's Point Pleasant. For all that to happen in such a small area is really, really strange.
And one of the things I like to share with people too is Point Pleasant is right in the Bible Belt, and it's a very conservative people that live there. So they're not the kind of people who are going to go about making things up for publicity. And these are really straight-laced, fundamental. I go to work, 7 to 5, and I'm just a normal guy. These aren't people looking for attention.
Yeah, precisely. And granted, some folks may say, well, your town has a festival based on this creature, so sure, you're looking for attention. There's a difference between a town making trade of something and somebody seeking attention. Just because your town makes trade on something doesn't mean that you coming out with something will be to your best interest.
Yeah, most of the people who reported sightings back in the 60s, it didn't do anything positive for their reputations. I'll put it that way. People did believe them, but I mean, the way Denny Bellamy described it to us, and he's the gentleman who runs the Mason County Visitors and Convention Bureau Center in Point Pleasant. He said the people who did come out, I mean, although they were believed, they were crushed. Yeah. Basically, Linda Scarberry never really recovered. She developed some bad habits, shall we say, and her marriage fell apart. And she reported sightings over the years, and she was still traumatized by it till the day she passed away at a very young age, early 50s. So it didn't do anything really positive for the folks then. I think today, like to your point, it's done wonderful things for the community of Point Pleasant, because this is a community that when the Silver Bridge did collapse, it was their major line of traffic and commerce for over-the-road people. Yeah. And the whole community really went down the tubes because they lost all the revenue from the out-of-towners.
Yeah, absolutely true. So the fact that they can use this and build back, that is a great thing. But once again, that doesn't necessarily tie to everybody who says they have an experience having a good experience with that. That is something that we talk about on this show all the time, is that you think you want to have that experience. Once you have it, would you be able to share it with anybody without fear of ridicule, without fear of losing a job, clearances, what have you?
There's a documentary that came out a few years ago by Small Town Monsters, Seth Greenblood and his crew, and they actually interviewed the guy who did the screenplay for the Mothman Prophecies movie, a guy by the name of Richard Haddam. And Richard goes on record basically to state that he's never had paranormal experiences, but he was dying to have them when he was younger. Said now that he's gotten a little bit older, he said he's happy to chronicle these things. They're fun to talk about. He said, let the experiencers have the experiences. I don't want one. Yeah. I've talked with a lot of experiencers, Bill. I've got a lot of books by them. I've met a lot of experiencers, and not that their experience was not a life-changing one, not that it didn't steal their life in a different way. But it is often traumatic for them for years. Now, maybe later in life they make sense out of it and it sends them down a different spiritual path. But and even if it doesn't send them through years of trauma, but sends them, like our guest that we spoke to a week ago, talking about growing up and being a full-on member of his Methodist community and everything else, then actively witnessing a UFO and it totally changing his spirituality and his life. And he's a man in his 60s. Sure.
His whole paradigm shifted and changed on a dime. But he was open to that experience, and there are tons of people that when they have these experiences, Bill, it doesn't bode well for them. It doesn't go well for them.
I have not had any real, what I would call paranormal experiences. I did have a couple personal instances earlier in life that I thought borderline could have been something strange, but I think they were more due to some different emotional things I was going through at an earlier stage of my life. I will say that my wife has had a number of different paranormal experiences, but I think that she's like this gentleman that you're talking about. I'm in my 50s. She's in her early 60s. and we're both Methodists as well. And it hasn't changed our faith, but it's altered, I think, our ability to be able to look at things from more of an open-minded perspective and, take things into account rather than discounting other people's experiences out of hand. You like to give people the benefit of the doubt and hear them out and find out where they're coming from, because I am open to strange possibilities. I believe they happen. I don't think everything is a paranormal experience. Sometimes we see things funny and they don't add up correctly to us, but there's stuff out there we can't explain. And I think it's really important as researchers that we honor the individuals who come forward, because that's a pretty tough step to take.
Yeah, it's a hard step to take. It's a big, hard step to take, but yet still more and more in our society, in numerous instances, we have been showed in the last many years that let a few people come forward, then start digging into it. You might be surprised what it's about. You might be surprised that there's something to it. And when it comes to the experiences surrounding Mothman, there is definitely something to it. Whether it is an all-consuming force, who knows? Now let's get into some of the more frightening cases of encounters with Mothman that you guys were able to put into bridging the tragedy.
So the people who we interviewed who had the experiences, the paranormal experiences, that would be Andy Colvin, who is also a researcher and author. I alluded to him earlier. He's done a lot to collect John Keel's missing works from Fate, Saga, other magazines that were published over the years, and his childhood friend, Harriet Plumbrook. And both of them experienced things that we would refer to as missing time. In fact, Harriet, they were both, they're now 62, so they would have been like 7, 8 years old when this was happening. But they both lived in an area of Charleston, West Virginia. It's about 50 miles removed from Point Pleasant. But Charleston was having just as many, if not more, Mothman sightings during that flap that we're familiar with in Point Pleasant. It just wasn't publicized because Keel didn't really visit there at length, and because Mary Heyer, who was the newspaper reporter for the Athens, Ohio Messenger, was located right there in Point Pleasant. So Point Pleasant got most of the PR, but in Charleston, on an area called Bird Mountain, which is in a small holler type area, which I was never familiar with the terminology of what the word holler means until here recently, but Harriet was out for a stroll. And as she was walking along, she looked up at the sky and she saw a cigar-shaped figure floating. And she stared at it for what seemed like a minute or so, turned around and went home, came to find out that she had 3 hours worth of missing time. So with this missing time incident, Andy also had built a shrine to Mothman. He and two of his friends had built a shrine. And shortly after that, he and his friend Tommy had visions of what they described as World War III happening in the year 2001. Now, we all know what 2001 means, 9/11. He believes they saw a vision of 9/11 happening. And he said it looked like it was on a much larger scale than what actually happened, although it was hugely traumatic and very impactful. Obviously, we still talk about it all these years later, and we have a holiday now to commemorate the tragedy there. Think about a little kid, 7, 8 years old, and how our scope of the world is so much different for that age than we are now. So something that probably seemed cataclysmic and earth-shattering, which it truly was, but on a much smaller scale than what he really thought it was. Both of these individuals, Andy and Harriet, attended the same school, and they were kind of visited on a regular basis by what we'd have to call government people that showed up and kind of sequestered the two of them along with a handful of other kids that were referred to as the genius kids. And these genius kids were allowed to do different things in their classes than the other kids were. In fact, Harriet at one point in time was basically given a text, and I don't recall what she said it was. It is in the book, but she read this text, several pages of it, and then an hour later, the teachers or these people, these government folks, came back in and they began grilling her on the information, and she had 100% total recall. And that's a gift that she's had for her entire life since then.
Wow.
Both of these two, Andy and Harriet, have IQs in the 160s. And Harriet has worked as a medical intuitive and a hypnotherapist, as well as a therapist for psychological counseling for most of her career. She's retired now, and Andy has made his living the last 20 years publishing books and doing art. So they were both gifted in ways that they didn't have abilities in after seeing their experiences of the paranormal that they associate with Mothman.
Wow, that is incredible. And we talk regularly with folks like Kathleen Martin, who's the niece of Betty and Barney Hill, worked with MUFON for years on their experience or resource team, still does that. But she has even said lately that her work has switched to more of the spiritual side because it seems like experiencers have been having some kind of residual affect, as though they have been shifted into another vibration. They seem to come back with healing qualities, things like this, all kinds of really interesting other phenomenology that happens after their experience. And of course, I've posed on the show before that perhaps their experience literally just shifted their mind and their being into a new paradigm, and it's one of those, once you're shifted into that vibration, it's a whole lot easier to see the things that are in that vibration.
Absolutely. And when we talked to Andy and Harriet both, who I just referred to, neither one of them experienced the trauma that we were really looking for. It was life-changing. The experiences all altered their lives substantially, but theirs were on the positive side, which was really kind of neat to see that.
Wow. And how many people had a positive experience with their Mothman sighting?
Absolutely. The people that we talked to about sightings, again, the two folks I just mentioned are the ones that had the direct paranormal experiences. The other folks that we talked to, we discussed more of what was going on in the community, what was the vibe about the Mothman, how was this affecting, society there in Point Pleasant and Gallipolis, Ohio. But we didn't have any other direct experiencers. The rest of the folks that we talked to, we focused more on the bridge disaster and how the bridge disaster affected them. So we had two sets of guiding questions, and we asked everybody, all of them, but really only two of them had direct experiences. The rest of them were all about, direct paranormal experiences. The rest were all about the trauma that the area went through and that people personally went through.
Yeah. And once again, the bridge collapse was something that utterly changed the town. It's your main point of connection with the outside world. So it really did become a point of disconnect. What was the vibe of the town when that happened?
Well, the way that it's been explained to us, and of the people we interviewed, Susan Sayer is somebody who works for Jeff Wamsley at the Mothman Museum and in some of Jeff's other stores there locally. She and a lady by the name of Linda Lane, who lives on the other side of the river, and her friend Marva Bailey, all three of them talked about how sad it was. She couldn't remember people smiling. Everybody was sad. The energy was super low. People were grieving. They were mourning. I mean, there were 46 people who died in the Silver Bridge disaster. Wow. So out of a population of, 10, 12,000 people, if you didn't know somebody who went down in the bridge disaster, you knew somebody who lost their life in the Silver Bridge disaster. So it was incredibly somber. But because of what those folks went through, it catapulted all of them, everybody we talked to, into a different way of perceiving life, of having different goals, of reframing different things. And we were able to capture such really good information from all 11 of the interviews that we had. Really, everybody grew by going through this.
Wow. And now, to switch back for just a second to the cryptozoology side of this, to the legendary side, that of course fascinates people more than anything else. The description of Mothman is probably the most unique, probably one of the most unique cryptids out there. Let's get into that a minute. The description of Mothman and what the witnesses who did see it say it looked like.
And there were a few different variations. They were similar but slightly different. The first people who perceived or actually witnessed Mothman were some gravediggers in a small town called Clendenin, West Virginia. They were in a cemetery. They were taking care of their business, and they noticed that there was a gray flying humanoid type creature above them up at the tree line, which obviously scared them half to death. Now, that was a gray visage, a gray brownish visage. Then there was the one that we reported, the shadowy being, black silhouetted with piercing red eyes. That's the most prominent representation of Mothman. But there are also some people who had perceived Mothman as well. And one of them was a guy by the name of Tom Urey. And Tom Urey was the manager of a shoe store within West Virginia. And he was commuting from Point Pleasant, I think, to Charleston. And as he was driving, he described the biggest bird that he ever saw. So Tom saw it as a bird. The gravediggers saw it as a gray-brown type of a creature, winged humanoid. And then the folks like the Scarberries and the Millettes and the other folks in town, for the most part, saw it as a black-winged creature with piercing red eyes.
Wow. And even to think about that, to have the images up that I have right now, the original sketches, things like that, frightening. I have, and a lot of people, of course, with the sketch, bring up the fact, oh, well, it could be like a giant owl. Don't get me wrong. I have had my giant barn owl experiences here in Texas where I've turned around and there's literally like a 3.5 foot tall owl in a tree, like at eye level. They're huge. They're massive. That's not what this is. This is something entirely different. I have here my little copy of the Mothman.
Sure.
And this is from a little series of cryptids that came out that live on the shelf behind me. Almost bat-like. There's a lot to it that is humanoid, most definitely. Even the statue of Mothman that has been erected in the town, I think does a lot of justice to the comparisons between the accounts that people had.
Yeah, that statue is actually a representation of a Frank Frazetta painting, which was on the cover of the very first Mothman Prophecies book. Yeah,
precisely. And, the Mothman Prophecies in and of itself, I think, brought a lot of attention to this otherwise tiny little case that was there and gone. Yes, the bridge collapse made national news, things like that. But the paranormal stuff attached to it really didn't.
I think, and you mentioned this sometime earlier, but I think if the bridge disaster didn't happen, we might not be having this conversation right now, because
I don't think we would.
Not that I don't believe, I'm not one that believes that Mothman or paranormal phenomena caused the bridge to fall. In fact, the people that we interviewed, all 11 of them didn't claim they believed that either.
Yeah.
But because of the timeliness of the bridge disaster, the fact that 13 months to the date before that, and for those 13 months, all of this different plethora of paranormal stuff was happening, that it puts a huge exclamation point on the case. It's why the book was written. It's why the movie came out. It has a lot to do with why, like I say, we're talking about this today. Without that happening, it's just a real odd thing that took place 55 years ago that maybe we're going to read about in history books. Maybe we're not.
Yeah, precisely. I mean, and once again, like if you were an engineering student, you'd probably be hearing about it. Once again, pretty big bridge disaster. If you were in that course of study, something like that in a general history class, probably not, and like you said, if the books hadn't been written, if the accounts hadn't been put together and put out that way, we definitely wouldn't be having this conversation. It would be relegated to the point of local cryptid.
And I think
that's about it.
Mary Heyer, the newspaper reporter, was so well respected within the community of Point Pleasant. It really gave John Keel carte blanche to interview these people because they trusted Mary and Mary trusted John. And if it weren't for the two of them collaborating the way that they did, most of this stuff never would have come out. People would have been afraid to talk about it.
Yeah. Yeah. And once again, especially in such a small town when everything is scrutinized. If the prime example, I mean, I'll age myself real quick, Bill. Mayberry, where you still got Agnes on the line while you're talking.
Yep.
Where the Sunday blotter comes out in the newspaper and they print your address and what you were arrested for. Like, hey, make it easy for the lynch mob. But when you're in a community like that, everybody knows everything about you.
Yep. Danny Bellamy made the statement. He said, just like you did, we're Mayberry.
Yeah.
He said, if you take the cars out and put cars from the 50s and 60s on the streets, it looks like you're back in the 50s and 60s again because town just hasn't changed.
Yeah. Yeah. No real need for change necessarily.
Yeah.
And even now, I brought up a while ago the stats. It was, I think it's 4,000 people that officially live in Point Pleasant as of 2020 census, something like that. So yeah, utterly small town. And one of those that you know everybody, your cousin goes to school with them,
Absolutely. Yeah.
So it's one of those that businesses become affected. Everything becomes affected. And not just that, but infected with the affected.
Mm-hmm.
What has that done for the community of Point Pleasant? I guess, how has that, I mean, of course they've come to accept the lore, everything else to the point that they have a festival, but how did that healing come about? How did it come to a point of acceptance for Mothman instead of utter fear being instilled because it all happened just before the bridge collapse?
Well, interestingly enough, according to Jeff Wamsley, again, who is the co-founder of the Mothman Festival and the proprietor of the Mothman Museum, it took a long time. I mean, really, Jeff had described to us in his interview that when the bridge fell, the bridge embankment that went from Point Pleasant and approached going to the river, that part of the bridge was left intact for 10 years. So here you've got this bridge that begins and then stops. And he said it's like a clean break. If you were to take your bike, you could ride your bike right off this thing like a ramp into the river. And to have that thing sitting there like an icon, basically just illustrating that the bridge disaster happened, it was really slow to change. People were afraid to talk about Mothman for the most part because they were afraid that talking about it would bring it back again. So they lived in fear for a long time.
Yeah.
And the emotional pain from the disaster was very prominent for a long, long time afterwards. Now, according to Jeff and Denny Bellamy, they both spoke in their interviews about how it took a lot of time, even after the Mothman Prophecies movie came out, for the community to really embrace the legend. And Jeff basically said, hey, we're missing out on a lot of revenue here. We could have a festival. We could make this kind of a big thing. And nobody really saw it developing as rapidly as it did. Now, the festival's been going on for 20 some odd years.
Yep.
But it's gone from just having a couple of tables where Carolyn sold hamburgers and Jeff sold one book into now this last festival a few months ago, 30,000 people were there.
Wow.
It's really revitalized the community, but it took a long time for people to really embrace it because of the fear of maybe invoking it, coming back, and also in reverence of the fact that so many people passed away.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, and, I think that's an important thing to bring up, because you definitely don't want to monetize that. You do not want to monetize the disaster, and you want to make a definite, clear distinction that nobody thinks that the two are tied together. Nobody thinks that one is tied to the other, that the Mothman caused the bridge collapse and we're making money off that, or anything like that. That would be definitely improprietous.
Correct. And Jeff makes a point to not sell anything within his business that reflects exactly what you just said. He did not want to make money from the misery that the community went through by talking about the bridge disaster.
Yeah.
When we set about our study, we contacted Ashley Walmsley, who's Jeff's daughter and also a business person in Point Pleasant. And we said, Ashley, we've got a handful of people that are interested, but we need to cast a wider net. We need to find more people to participate. What do we do? And she said to get a hold of Beth Sargent, who at that time, Beth was in charge of the local newspapers. So we contacted Beth and set up a conference call with her. And one thing she really made clear to us was that you can talk about Mothman, you can ask people about the bridge disaster. Don't combine the two together. Don't do that, because people are going to have resentments about that. That's not going to sit well with the people. So we were very careful to not do that.
Yeah. Yeah. And hugely respectful of you not to, because there's, there's a lot of overzealousness in a lot of the facets that is the paranormal community, whether it's cryptids, whether it's UFO, UAP research, what have you. It's hard not to sometimes see the raging confirmation bias that exists. It's hard to sometimes not point out things that happen, and it's hard sometimes not to. It's really hard to not go down the rabbit hole of connecting things like that when they have been connected. People have made that connection spuriously for no good reason for years.
Well, I think the good reason for them doing so is to try to monetize it, which is something that, I mean, we wrote a book. It's nice to get paid when you sell books. Don't get me wrong, but
sure,
we really set out to do this as a psychological study, and we set it up with parameters and guidelines and disclaimers. And one of those disclaimers was in the initial set of interview questions that in no way, shape, or form do we wish to correlate the Silver Bridge disaster with the paranormal phenomena other than the contemporary status of both events. They both happened at the same time.
Yeah.
They were going on, not necessarily simultaneously, but they were right there happening at the same time. But we were very clear and tried to be as distinct as possible that we were not trying to claim that this paranormal stuff is what brought the bridge down and caused all these people all this tragedy.
Well, and let's get into that for just a second, because you actually run a group, Phenomenology Research Professionals, and I think it's really important to get into how your study was done, because it wasn't just a general, like sit down with a camera and interview somebody. Your process was a little bit different. And like you said, to make certain that you didn't cross that line and that you didn't bias somebody from the beginning.
Right. And I apologize if you hear my dogs barking in the background.
That's okay. They're animals. They bark. They're doing their job.
One of them's not happy with the other one. I can tell the tone of voice. But basically, I mean, really the way the book is set up is it is a dissertation. It's a doctoral level dissertation that has interviews interspersed in between the chapters. So what we did initially was to come up with a research plan. And we utilized the same format that I did for my dissertation when I completed my doctorate. And that was basically to go along a certain pathway towards setting up the study. So we set up guiding interview questions. We utilized the methodology that's known as grounded theory. And in grounded theory, it doesn't use statistics as the meat and potatoes of the study. What it does is it compares and contrasts the meaning units in the things that are stated by the participants in the study. So what we did is we interviewed all 11 of the folks. We did do audio and video recordings, but they were basically done so that we could transcribe all these interviews and then upload them into a software. So we uploaded them into the software Atlas TI. And what Atlas does is it serves as a repository to keep all the data organized. At that point, we had to go through each one of the statements that every one of the participants made and pull a meaning unit out of each one of those statements. And let's just say Linda Lane, upon getting off work on a Friday night, drove up to go across the Silver Bridge and all of a sudden noticed the bridge is not there. And so the meaning unit in that would be something along the lines of astonishment, disbelief, where's the bridge, et cetera, et cetera. So in doing this, we ended up with about 2,300 meaning units, which are referred to as initial codes. The next step is to categorize those meaning units into what are known as focused codes. So we took the 2,300, filtered them into 90 focused codes, and then we continued to look for more depth in each one of the things that were stated and how they related. And at that point, we came up with theoretical codes. And those theoretical codes basically became what we sought, which were the dimensions of post-traumatic growth experienced by the people in West Virginia in 66 and 67 who endured the bridge disaster and or witnessed paranormal phenomena. And we came up with those dimensions, and I'm happy to share those if you'd like to hear them.
Oh, please, please.
So the dimensions that we were able to distill from the study were appreciation for life, community, entrepreneurialism, family, gratitude, memorial, optimism, patience, perseverance, personal development, perspective taking, positive reflection, preparedness, responsibility, and spiritual development.
Wow. Wow. And those were all of the grouped areas of growth from people who had an experience.
Exactly. The phenomenon is known as post-traumatic growth. It's not necessarily the opposite of post-traumatic stress disorder, but it's the good that comes from the bad circumstances that we face in life, which certainly the bridge disaster and or experiencing paranormal phenomena could be.
Yeah. Yeah. My favorite one amongst that was entrepreneurship.
Boy, has it gone off the charts in Point Pleasant.
Well, and you know, it's interesting because over the last couple years, you know, with the lockdowns and everything else and the pandemic and the shutdown of the world, people, realized that maybe they didn't have to do what made them miserable every day anymore.
Right. Right.
Bosses realize that, hey, this dude's a whole lot happier if he doesn't sit through traffic for an hour and a half before he gets here for 8 hours a day.
I was one that was working remotely for a decade before the pandemic hit, but the decade has done wonderful things for my career, my careers, my businesses, and my ability to be able to get most of what I need done, not in an office setting, but within my own home. It's been phenomenal.
Yeah, and that is a hard step to make, Bill, for a lot of people. It was a hard step for me to take. It literally took me coming home from a wedding to getting fired from a job because I went to a wedding.
Wow.
And it was like, well, I've already got a lot of gigs. What if I just get more gigs? And then next thing I know, I was a professional sound company. That's all I did was run sound for people. But it took a life-changing moment. It took something that was traumatic, you know, the random loss of a job, for me to have that eye shed moment, you know, where the scales drop off. And, for this to be, that was a big conversation, like I said, with Wally Wagner that we had about his come to Jesus moment. Of wow, I've lived my life in utter judgment of other people, and it took him having a minute and a half with a UFO for that to happen.
Yep, everything changes
to shock him into a different state and into a different paradigm. So
everything changes.
It's really interesting to see. There was very little that would be if you did a psychological breakdown, there would be very little from what you just said that would be in the negative column.
No, that stuff was all good. I mean, and again, we did seek the positive things that came out of that. Obviously, there were negative. I mean, anybody who lost a family member or a friend, that's devastating. Yeah. And we certainly don't want to downplay that. Our focus was, let's look at what happened. Let's look at what happened paranormally and also the bridge disaster. And then let's focus on the good that came of it, because there's always a silver lining. If we focus on the silver lining, then we're shooting towards a positive goal. And that's important to me.
Yeah, no, that we talk about that on this show all the time, Bill, literally, is the fact of you've got to learn to turn tragedy around into a silver lining. You've got to learn to see the positive, the learning experience, what have you. Even the reason for you being present at the tragedy. Mm-hmm. You know, why were you there? And getting to the root of that can be very, very hard for some people. It can be very traumatic for some people. But it is typically, by the end of the process, a life-changing experience, as you have noted with your study.
As an adjunct to what you just said, Harriet, when we interviewed her, we talked to her about people's trauma and the best ways to process trauma. And as a therapist, she said, a lot of therapists want to get you to talk about the trauma, and they want to do it early in the process. She said, that's wrong. Yeah. You can lead them in a certain direction, but you need to be open to where they're coming from and meet them where they're at. Yep. Because to be able to open those wounds too soon can cause much more damage than good. Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. You've got to let it. And, you know, it reminds me a lot of when I worked with kids, because you're trying to get the same message to all of them. However, they don't all learn in the same way. They're all learning at a different level and in a different way. So you literally have to meet them where they're at with the material. And I think any good teacher understands that and internalizes that and practices that. And I mean, there are a lot of teachers out there that my hat's off to because they're doing the job. Yeah. And then there are some that really go that extra mile because they've got that understanding and that determination and desire to be able to meet the kids where they're at. You know, I wish I would have had more teachers like that. The one that comes to mind for me was a high school English teacher who saw a diamond in the rough in me. It just took me another 40 years to be able to become a writer. Yeah. Yeah. You know, even the fact of you meeting these experiencers where they're at, you aren't coming at them like you're saying, like most people would, tying one thing to another and trying to milk or even lead or guide a story down a path for profit. It was really important for us not to do that. Yeah. And their story, not ours. Yeah. Yeah. And some incredible work. Let everybody know. I would love to have you on again and again to really crack into this, because the phenomenology of experience like this is so interesting. The way that it affects people, and the way that it affects people who were at the same sighting, who witnessed the same thing, and yet still they can have two totally different experiences. That's true. It's really interesting and really, really proof of the fact of the truth is really a conglomeration of our experiences. It is. It's a collection. Yeah. It's a composite. Bill, thank you so much for your time. I greatly appreciate it. I'm glad that I was finally able to get you on the show. It's been a great conversation. Well, Chris, I really enjoyed it. I'm more than happy to talk about this at another time as well. Oh, absolutely. Anytime, man. Anytime you have something to promote. As a matter of fact, it's time for shameless self-promotion on our show. So let everybody know where they can go to keep up with you, where they can go to keep up with the latest from Phenomenology Research Associates, where they can learn. Because quite honestly, I would love to have you on to do a whole show on phenomenology of anomaly, because one of the things that
I have been kind of rabbit holing on over the last many months, Bill, is the idea of we need to lose our preconceived notions. We need to come at things as blind tater as we can. You know,
I agree.
But all too often we are so engrossed in a topic or so passionate about something that we will gladly bypass evidence or proof.
Or we get invested in the outcome.
Yeah.
And that's something that's really, really important to me as a researcher, that we bracketed our own experience, which means you basically go blind to it the best you possibly can as a human being.
Yeah.
Because we're so passionate. Jackie and I are so passionate about the whole Mothman phenomenon and Point Pleasant. But you got to pull that out when you're doing a scientific study.
Yes.
Because it's not about me. It's not about Jackie.
Yeah.
It's about the people that we interviewed and their collective experience. And what are the commonalities? How do we figure that out? And you have to do that, without having your own preconceived notions playing a factor.
Well, and also be ready to accept any data that comes along and just follow the trail that it takes you down.
Yes.
To get caught up in things that's mania. It's not science.
Yeah, one of the neatest things that came from the study was interviewing Susan Sayer, where in conversation it came out that Mothman kind of did save the community of Point Pleasant. Not that he was there as a superhero in a cape that was there to save people, but 50 years later, now the community is thriving as a result of the Mothman phenomenon, which I thought was a really neat observance that we wouldn't have come to on our own.
Yeah, precisely. And like we were just saying a minute ago, the fact of, though it may have been a frightening experience when the community was going through it, especially because all the high strangeness abutted up against the disaster, they didn't tie the two together intrinsically.
Right.
That was done through, I guess really local legend, things like that, folklore, that comes along, and true misunderstanding of, well, literally the phenomenology behind the experiences and what happened. So,
agreed.
Yeah, let everybody know where they can go to keep up with your research, where they can go to purchase the book, everything else, Bill. It is time for shameless self-promotion.
Well, and I thank you for that, Chris. So Jackie and I are both very active on Facebook. My profile is just my name. It's Bill Soukoulas. Jackie's profile is Jackie Myers Soukoulas. The bridge is called Bridging the Tragedy, Silver Linings in the Mysterious Ohio River Valley. It can be found on Amazon. We also have author copies. If you'd like to contact us directly, more than happy to ship you a copy signed and autographed. Yeah, that's basically it.
All right. Well, please do hold the line while we close things out. I want to thank you so much for your time and your vast, vast wealth of knowledge on this topic. It is absolutely incredible, Bill, because once again, I could have contacted any author about legends, cryptids, things like that to talk about Mothman. It's not what I wanted to talk about. That's the average in hearsay, to have this conversation and to get into the science of the impact of the phenomena on the community is an absolutely fascinating conversation. So thank you very much for doing the research and for doing the legwork in this. Absolutely great stuff. Hold the line.
I appreciate the opportunity. Thank you.
Absolutely. Hold the line real quick while you were online checking out everything from Bill Soukoulas. Make sure to stop on by Curious Realm. CuriousRealm.com is where you can find all the episodes, folks. That is where you can find the experiencer page. If you are an experiencer of Mothman or other cryptids, if you have had a paranormal experience, stop on by CuriousRealm.com/story. Share your experience with us. When we come back from this commercial break, folks, we will be joined by the amazing Robert Duncan. We will be talking about the illusory reality in which we live. The fact that it's not even really a theory anymore. They have proven non-local reality. So we will get into the concept of living in an illusion, living in the Matrix, and the technologies behind same right after this with Robert Duncan. With the rise in attention to the health benefits of cannabis and cannabinoids, including CBD, True Hemp Science has become one of the premier providers of full-spectrum CBD and CBD-related products. Using a proprietary spagyric process, True Hemp Science extracts maximum benefit from the whole hemp plant. Buds, leaves, stems, seeds, even roots. Every part of the plant is used and then reused to formulate a rich, complex profile of CBD, CBD derivatives, and terpenes guaranteed to provide the relief and benefits you need daily. Visit TrueHempScience.com to experience the best CBD oils, edibles, and topicals on the market today. And use code CURIOUS7 to save 7% off your entire purchase of $50 or more and get 2 25 milligram CBD cookies or brownies free. That website again is TrueHempScience.com and the code is CURIOUS7. The Curious Realm Podcast is your source for the latest and greatest news and events in the world of the paranormal, esoteric, and forbidden knowledge. And there's no better way to spark the conversation than with items from the Curious Realm store. Choose from fan favorites like hoodies, mouse pads, coffee mugs, and more. Buy books and items from your favorite Curious Realm guests. Get your hands on the latest gear for paranormal investigations and experiments we discuss on the show. Open your web browser and stop on by the Curious Realm store at curiousrealm.com/store to buy the latest Curious Realm wear and out-of-this-world gifts for yourself, your family, or a mind that you want to open. That website again is curiousrealm.com/store. Have you considered starting a podcast? Looking for a way to make your business a voice of authority in an industry? Then Podcast Cadet is the solution for you. Whether starting a podcast for yourself, your brand, business, school, church, or just plain fun, Podcast Cadet is here to help you navigate the waters of the podcast industry. Specializing in one-on-one consultation and training with industry professionals in fields ranging from podcast technology and editing to distribution, monetization, and even social media strategies. Podcast Cadet tailors their services to the specific needs of you and your podcast. Do you already have a podcast and trying to find ways to engage and grow your audience? Sign up for your Podcast Cadet audit today and let us help you explore new and exciting ways to leverage your content and elevate your podcast brand to whole new levels. From consultational workshops to affordable podcast production and maintenance packages, Podcast Cadet is your one-stop shop for everything podcast related on the internet. Visit podcastcadet.com today to sign up for your consultation or training and use code CURIOUS20 to save 20% off your entire purchase. That website again is podcastcadet.com. Hello, everybody, and welcome back from that commercial break. Thank you so much to all of our sponsors, especially WebWorks Wireless. WebWorks Wireless is your home for no throttling, no credit check internet, just about anywhere that there is cell phone signal. That is who we use for on-site live streaming. That is who we use to live stream to our website every week. Stop on by and check them out. WebWorksWireless.com is their website. Our guest in this segment, the amazing Dr. Robert Duncan. He's typically here talking about TI, targeting technologies, other incredible technologies that are out there. He spent years and years working in labs, coming up with this kind of science, coming up with algorithms, all kinds of things. We will be talking today about the non-local reality, the fact that are we living in a matrix, in an actual illusion? Welcome back to the show, Dr. Duncan. How are you doing?
Oh, great. Thanks for having me back on. I always enjoy your very relaxed conversations yeah, so this is a little different. This is more theoretical, metaphysical.
Yeah.
We're talking about what most humans have difficulty in believing, and that is we exist through our human condition, our experience of being human and trying to model reality, the physical reality outside of us, and where exactly is the subjective and objective experience? Where's that information? Where does it lie? And hopefully we get into it here that I can prove not only there are higher order intelligences than us as single human beings, but that the universe itself is conscious. So,
sure.
That's my bold statement for the starting off.
Not just your bold statement. The bold statement of numerous guests we've had, especially people like Lynn Buchanan, remote viewer, the folks that we've had that were laser physicists that became remote viewers and stuff like that. Like, it's interesting to me that the whole field of remote viewing, everybody that was involved in Project Stargate, from the paper that begat the program, which was basically a paper by Hal Puthoff saying that experimenters were inadvertently affecting their experiments.
Yes. Well, in quantum physics, that is exactly right. You cannot observe an experiment without becoming part of it.
Yeah, absolutely. Because at that point, you are putting an expected result. And as soon as you put an expected result out there, you have now tainted, technically, the experiment.
That's correct.
And even though that's subtle, it goes right back to the conversation that we had an episode ago about manifestation and about the fact of, like, this is something that has been spoken of for generations, for millennia, the idea of being able to change the world around you, being able to manifest things in the world around you. And we are just getting to the point, Dr. Duncan, that these things are a reality in the world of quantum physics.
Yes, and it's funny you bring up manifestation, and that's a word that a lot of people don't fully understand.
It's a buzzword now. It's like saying New Age back in 1972.
Yeah, it is. But what we're going to find out, our species lives long enough that we were our own gods all along. We are the creators of the future and of reality. And so if you manifest something through your own mind in your universe, your localized, well, I'll even say localized universe, the degrees of freedom of mind that you have, you are shaping it. Now we have to get into precise definitions. What is you mean? Is it all your cells connected since birth through four-dimensional space-time, from fingernails to the end tips of your hair?
Yeah.
Or are you something far greater than that? And I always like to give the analogy of the Gestalt mind. Now, Gestalt means the whole. Now, neurons that make up our brain, now just give me this.
Please.
We don't have to debate it.
No.
Whether we're quantum computers or we're just biological computing systems, whatever. But the parts do not add up to the whole. And that means the whole is greater than the sum of its parts. And we know this in network theory and information theory. But now I want to take it to even another level, outside of ourselves, the disassociated remote viewing state, whatever you want to call it, where you become one with the larger life form of Earth or fellow man or whatever you want to call it.
Sure.
And that we are definitely, as Einstein said, an optical delusion of our consciousness, that we are prisoners of our own mind because we cannot reach this very often. There are some that can, this feeling of wholeness, of seeing the bigger organism of which we are part of. And so Einstein said it very eloquently. I don't have his quote in front of me, but it's very important that of going from the sense of self to realizing you're a neuron in a much larger brain.
Yeah.
Now, whether you get to feel that or not depends on how well you can separate yourself from the body and be part of the larger information flows.
Yeah, because you really do have to realize that you are a point of datum in a set of data.
Yeah.
That is what you are to the universe as a whole, period. And a minute ago when you were talking about, we don't have to have the conversation of soul. We don't have to have that existential conversation. All we have to do is realize the fact that regardless, there is an energy that is created by our atoms, or that even just holds our atoms together, whatever force of the universe you want to call that. By all known physics, quantum, particle, theoretical, what have you, that energy cannot dissipate. It can only change form. It cannot be created or destroyed.
That's correct. And a lot of people miss that.
That's just physics. I'm not talking. I mean, if you want to call that afterlife because your vibration or whatever held these particles, because right now you're in Idaho. I'm in Austin, but we're sharing electron shell.
Exactly.
We are 90% empty space. I am not sitting in this chair. What I consciously know to be my buttock is repelled by the electrons of what I know to be a chair.
Yeah, that's right.
That's what I'm feeling by all non-local theory. Yeah.
You're so right. And what's interesting is what we're doing here is a form of hive minding.
Sure.
Although a lot of people just say, well, it's conversing. No, it's actually more than that, because if you were the last man on Earth, okay, what are your relationships to the universe or animals or plants on your planet, or however you stay alive? But hive minds, we went from snail mail, people on ponies delivering mail, to telephone, to the internet, telegraph, blah, blah, blah. And now the next step is we're going to be able to communicate at the speed of thought, which is basically the speed of sound in neuron form, so bionic gradients. But sorry if I'm babbling a little bit, and then when we're beings of light, literally in faster information processing form, we will literally be a whole of communications, specialties. Everyone's mind is accessible at any moment with each other. And now this is far into the future if our species survives. But,
sure. But and just to be clear, Robert, you are not a religious man. You are not a church going man. I don't know your personal full-on beliefs or habits, but we've been friends for a few years now. I follow you on social media. Yeah. You know, most churchgoers I know give their pastor a shout out at Easter or Christmas. You know, it's not like this comes to you from any kind of religious or spiritual depth or adeptness.
Absolutely, and I'm glad you pointed that out, because I've reached the same conclusions as spiritual people, but from a totally scientific point of view.
Yeah.
That I can prove logically and mathematically through inductive and deductive reasoning of the subjective experience of being, as well as the objective understanding of the mathematics and physics of the universe, that this is absolutely a true thing.
Yeah.
Now, whether you want to anthropomorphization.
Yes.
Can't even say the word.
Anthropomorphize?
Yes, thank you. And they, personify it into human-like entities. Well, we have to do that as humans.
Sure.
But,
like you said at the beginning of the conversation, in order to understand the phenomenology and the anomaly, you have to understand the condition. You have to understand the human condition and what we are to begin with in order to understand how this phenomenology plays itself out and how, like you're saying, we are but a neuron within the hive brain of the universe.
Yeah. And isn't that fascinating? So here, let me go into something, thought experiments. Einstein always loved his thought experiments. And I would ask this in high school, in my prep school. It's now referred to as the teleporter problem. Teleportation, like in the Energizer problem of the Star Trek movies series or television series. If I had you on a table and I could stop your brain, let's just say freeze it for a sec, a nanosecond, and I did surgery and I took one neuron out, looked at its connections, synaptic connections or whatever, kept it stabilized, put it on a table in three-dimensional space, and replaced it with a synthetic, equally computation unit. We made it out of silicon rather than biology, perhaps. And doesn't really matter. It could be an entire table of pool balls and a causality, but it does the same function, equivalent function. And I keep doing this, and then I ask you, let's say I bring you back to life or stop the time freeze. Do you feel the same? You're going to say, yes, I feel exactly the same. And now I've replaced half your brain with silicon form, and I've put the other half that hasn't been started yet on another table. And I keep doing this till the surgery is complete. You're going to say you feel exactly the same. Now you're made of a different substance that has the same function, but you feel the same. You will claim you were the same being. You have the same sense of self. And now I bring back to life the other person on the other table, which you're going to claim is not me because you were continuous during that surgery.
And they're going to claim that you're not them.
Yeah, exactly. And that's what's going to happen. So who is real? And this is a metaphysical, philosophical question that humans are going to have to cope with.
We're going to have to cope with it very rapidly if we start doing full-on clone. And don't get me wrong, there are many people out there. I've tried to find a couple folks to actually have on the show who are talking about full-on human cloning already existing. Being out there in black labs, things like that. Now, I would not doubt that one bit.
Yeah.
I know for a fact that there is a pretty high-tech lab right down the road near Bastrop that does quite a bit of work in the primate realm that makes the news here and there. And speaking of which, there was an interesting experiment put forth. Some of these things, especially transhumanism. I think a lot of this conversation, Robert, really crosses into that transhumanist realm.
Oh, of course it does.
And into that realm of are we ready for what oh my God, the synthesizer. What I just forgot the synthesizer designer's name, who has the algorithm that predicts the future.
Kurzweil?
Yes, Kurzweil.
Okay.
Kurzweil. As what Kurzweil calls the singularity.
Yes,
the fact of there will be a singularity where human and machine meet. We more than shake hands. And it will be the fact that we have technology inside of our skin, that we have technology made out of skin, all kinds of things.
Yeah, he was one of my competitors when I was doing early AI and artificial intelligence.
Ray
so
Kurzweil,
Kurzweil.
He's got some. He's on another level.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm not saying that you are not on another level as well. Your brain and the fractal way it works is amazing.
I'm a freak, just say it.
His algorithm, though, it's wild because it literally does predict so many trends. It's really remarkable.
Great futurist, and I consider myself a futurist as well. And so I don't get in trouble, given my background. I try to discredit myself and say, I'm a science fiction writer. None of this is really happening.
Well, it's quite honestly like the conversations that we've had off air, things like that, where, there are numerous facets to your education, your credos. The work that you have done, what you are typically featured on shows for is a facet of the gem that is the mind of Robert Duncan. If people can only see that one facet, I'm sorry that they're missing the rest of the gem, because they're missing conversations like this that truly are the conversations like we need to be having. We need to be having these conversations. We need to be the ones that are free thinking for the scientists. Not that we don't need scientists in labs, but they need us to help guide them.
That is so well spoken. Yes, I was one of those young naive scientists, and we only cared about being at the cutting edge of technology and progressing. And we were not ethical or moral about what impact it would have on the human race and our planet or anything else. And so I know how these guys think. And they're not bad people. It's just they do need our moral guidance because they don't have time to think about the great outcome and what's going to happen with our species. And you said it precisely again. We are here in order to cause these conversations and the thinking process amongst our entire species, our tribe, and assuming we are the greatest species to help, protect this planet.
It's a heck of an assumption.
Yeah, I know it is. And you're right. I don't fully agree with it, but that's the human hubris. We always think we're the center of the universe.
There's that. But there is one thing that yes, we need Magellans. We need the people that tally ho go forward. Most definitely, we need unbridled science. Don't get me wrong, but there's also issues where, like the story of the hydrogen bomb.
Yes.
Not the first nuclear explosion, but the first hydrogen bomb, where they're like, I don't know, but by a lot of the math, we may ignite all the hydrogen in the atmosphere.
That was one of the scientists.
It's a possibility.
Same with CERN of creating mini black holes.
And it's one of those, like, somebody just goes, yeah, I guess.
Yeah, I guess. Let's do it.
I guess we find out one way or another.
Yeah, I know. When I was working at DARPA, I went around and asked guys what they were working on and stuff. And one of them was working on a certain technology that was, was for the military. And I asked them, so what are you doing here? And he was testing new kind of projectiles on gel dummies.
Working on Project Nunya?
Yeah, I don't know.
Project Nunya business.
But none of your business. But no, everyone, I had a good security clearance level, so everyone was friendly. But what was funny was his response that I quote all the time. I'm just here to see what's on the other side. Yeah.
And there's a lot of that question as well. But when you come to the concept of a non-local reality, when you come to this idea, suddenly warping physics doesn't seem that hard. Warping time doesn't seem that hard when you start to understand that time as we know it to begin with is but a infrastructure and a construct that we created. Not for any of you out there to destroy your faith or anything like that. But if you read that, like, God created this in a day, like, dude, day we came up with.
Yes.
We came up with a day as 24
metric.
Hours.
Yeah.
That's our metric. That's not like universal time scale.
It's not God's metric or anything like that. No.
So, yeah, it's not like, and even whenever you're considering the speed of light, that is only a constant through no medium.
Yes.
It's not an absolute constant. It is a constant in a vacuum.
That was Einstein's greatest blunder that he admitted to.
Yeah.
He's like,
I forgot to mention that because I was really overzealous.
And throughout time, in large time scale.
Yeah.
So
you want to beat the speed of light, put it through a medium.
Yeah. Yeah. There are other ways you can, the Cherenkov radiation is what causes nuclear reactors underwater in nuclear submarines to give off that blue glow, that green blue glow. And it's because particles, the radiation particles are traveling faster than the speed of light. And that's how they slow down. So there are things that travel faster than the speed of light in a medium. So you're right about saying information flow, speed of light being the constant is in the vacuum. And that's even in a Higgs field. Yeah. So of our universe. So there are a lot of constraints of some of the statements we make.
And that's just it. Because of the statements and how they're made, the constraints are there. Once you put that caveat in there, you realize that there's the option to go without the restraint.
Yes, exactly. And that's
which is a really let's explore that real quick, because not a lot of people realize that there is that utter flip option. Even we were having the conversation the other day about manifestation. Number one, how that word is now used like at one point very new agey, everything else. Now you hear it coming from a Sunday preacher. You could turn on Joel Osteen and hear him talking the same exact thing that a New Age book was talking in 1972.
Operation Mockingbird.
And it's interesting to see that, and it's interesting to see the flip, and it's interesting to see the flip of mentality that has happened over the last few years of trust the science. It's like, well, I guess the real question is, do you actually know the science, and do you realize the fact that science, by definition, can't be static?
That's right.
It's in constant shift and constant motion. Everything is a
triangulation on truth, the best we can with our tiny little brains.
And you are allowed to hypothesize anything through experiment and proof and not proof. You prove a hypothesis to the point of theory, and further experimentation brings it to the point of possible law.
That's right. And,
but you got to be willing to not put the thought in the box to begin with.
Yeah. Okay. I probably shouldn't bring this up, but you mentioned follow the science, and that kind of, by certain administrations is kind of a paradox, since the science hasn't happened yet.
Yeah.
And, okay. That's all I'm going to say about it. All right.
And that's true. And it's interesting. One of the things that we talk about regularly with Mike Turber is, and one of the reasons why I have the Curious Realm group, is because there's a lot of news out there. And if you aren't watching, you'd be surprised what passes through.
Yeah.
Not too long ago, they were talking about USOs, underwater submerged objects, things like that, in private conversations. And whenever the UFO hearings happened, anytime they brought up objects buzzing submarines at faster than the speed of sound, buzzing submarines.
That was me.
I knew you had a hobby somewhere other than rockets.
I can explain all UFOs.
It's wild to see, like, in the last year and a half, how Lockheed's F-16 based nuclear reactor platform, that patent has been released, that they have a nuclear reactor that can fit in an F-16 size object. Like the supercavitation USO that was just announced. Yeah. All these things. And whenever they mentioned that that was the one thing that, like, the 3 times it was mentioned in that hearing, you heard them say, like, we'll address that in our closed door meeting after this.
Exactly.
We'll address that in the closed door meeting.
Anything the public's allowed to know about is at least 30 years old minimum. Yeah. So, in terms of that technology. Well, and so we often will describe it as UFOs. You want me to say something that I'm allowed to say, but it's going to it always upsets UFO watchers. And that is, we work with directed energy weapons to create glowing orbs in the sky. Now, why did we do that? Like a laser cap pointer, is because jet fighters will follow them. They can go faster, slower than them. They can fry their own electrical equipment if they get in the beam. But the ionization of the atmosphere, the nitrogen, oxygen molecules, creates a radar reflection. So we can make an entire fleet, according to radar. Like, let's say we want to attack Europe. I know it's a ridiculous statement, but we can make it look like we're coming from one direction with 1,000 airplanes, while we actually attack them with stealth fighters from the other direction.
Oh, yeah. And the what I am about to bring up right now, I've just hopped into our knowledge vault. For those of you that want to follow the bouncing balls, so to speak, feel free to stop on by curiousrealm.com/knowledge/declassified. That's where you'll find things like the Lockheed Martin mini reactor patent, all kinds of. You'd have a field day in here, Doctor. This would be.
I would. Yeah.
But right here is the one that I want to bring up: F-18 laser pod countermeasures. Now, this was released all of a couple years ago. You can see right here, February 26, 2020.
All right. Good for you. Yeah.
Now, very interesting, because what this does, this is a laser beam projected from an F-18 pod that creates an infrared hologram.
Yeah.
That's visible and visible to the infrared targeting systems of missiles, things like that. So instead of throwing a cloud of chaff that's going to go away, this is like a targetable chaff that you can be like, it's over there and it's going this fast.
I can't believe they haven't erased that patent.
That's why I downloaded it and put it on my website. That's exactly why I do that. Because isn't it funny how every single video we have of these objects all comes from the infrared forward-looking pod of an F-18?
Yeah.
Every single video.
Yep. Or Navy ships or whatever. Yeah.
But they all come from the system that is...
Or whatever, yeah.
They all come from the system that is sitting right next to this system.
Yeah.
So, but these are the things that are out there. This is the kind of stuff that exists now that, you know, at one point was, hey, that was high science fiction, man. You know, that stuff that dates back to, like, you know, Star Wars. And I mean, like the Star Wars missile defense program, not like the work of fiction. I'm talking about full nonfiction, the actual existing lasers in the sky. It's wild. It's wild to think about that. And when you start thinking about things like the Neuralink by Tesla, this is one of them that I think that this is one that we really, as people, as humanity, need to kind of keep our eye on. There have been a few things over the last years. We've had the conversation numerous times about the lab in Japan that records dreams, things like that. I've actually got one of the videos queued up here of this in the lab. This is the Dream Center that did this, but very interesting to actively see a session of somebody's brain activity next to what they can capture coming from your brain. This is really phenomenal. And on occasion, you can kind of make something out. The company from Japan, I know I saw a product video whenever it first released, and that one you could almost see faces. It was pretty remarkable. And we now know from MIT, your former alma mater, that we can communicate with dreamers.
Yep.
We can have them answer questions while they're asleep, and non-auditorially.
That's right. That's right. And that's how you can steal passwords, and it's Inception, like the movie. Mm-hmm. You can get information, and they won't remember that they were dreaming while they gave out the information.
Yeah.
That's how powerful this interrogation technology is.
Oh, absolutely.
We can do it remotely.
Yeah.
You don't have to have EEG probes in your head. You know?
But that's remarkable, but not insane. Not insane. I mean, right now, I will bring up the article that I tagged you in the other day. Scientists build the world's tiniest antenna out of DNA. So if you think that this kind of process can't be done to you remotely or anything like that, oh no, they could absolutely use your DNA. They can
we are the microcircuit.
Yes.
You don't even need implants anymore. We are the body electric and magnetic. You know,
well, and that's exactly the theme of this conversation, is the fact that we are much more than we appear to be. We are already cybernetic organism. Yeah. And participating in this matrix. The idea of communication at a distance, the idea, really dig into some remote viewing sometimes, folks. Into some real results, some stuff that's out there. It's pretty phenomenal what can be garnered from a proper remote viewing session. And really just goes to prove things like ESP, precognition. I'm still very curious because, yes, I fully believe, as I said, to loop our conversation back, time, everything else, utterly relative. However, I have some questions about, remote viewing other time periods. Things like that. Like, I'm going to go remote view Atlantis. Or I'm going to go remote view December 28th, 1952. Something like that. As opposed to like, I'm going to remote view the dark side of the moon. That I would much more akin.
There is no such thing as the dark side of the moon, by the way.
Mm-hmm. Well, I'm a lunatic. I'm a moon fanatic. So now you've got me.
It rotates.
Yes.
It gets sunlight on the other side.
That's true. That's true.
Okay.
Yeah. Yeah. I was like, whoa, wait a minute. I'm not going to say there isn't some reefer involved in my life at some time. So you had me for a second there.
Here's a good segue, Chris, for the precogs with monkeys that we do now.
Yes.
A video I showed you. Can you display that?
Oh, absolutely. Let's preamble that for the audience real quick. Okay. Number one, there's a slight little echo that you're going to hear. That is an artifact from recording. But explain to the audience exactly what this monkey brain network is.
Sure. So we do this with humans. Obviously, we have been, and they're called hive mind networks. And my next book is called Emergent Minds. It's creating higher order intelligences from our single brains, which are a complex computing object, like a neuron, which is a simpler computing object, but it gives rise to intelligences that we can't understand from our simple perspective. And anyway, this is using monkey brains, since we're allowed to experiment on our ancient ancestors, that we put microchips in, much like neural lace that Elon Musk is doing, in order to create more brilliant objects. I call them aliens, but they're not from another planet, but they're so foreign to our form of thinking that they can see further into the future, further into the past, and have a better model of reality, of explanatory power and predictive power. And so we're using this for warfare reasons, as well as helping socially engineer society, excuse me. And so anyway, play the clip.
I will.
Yeah.
Here we go.
University. They had 3 monkeys with chips in their brain. Each of these monkeys can only see in 2 dimensions, 2D. But the monkeys together are rewarded with a treat, with some good food, if they can move a dot on the computer screen in 3D space to the right location. Well, each of these monkeys can't do it alone because they can only see 2D. They can't even move in 3D. But together, all 3 of those brains learn how to work together to consistently move the dot to the right 3D location. That finding is actually amazing. What it is telling us is that when multiple brains are wired together, they can perceive the world in a way that a single brain might not be able to do. They are collectively working as a single intelligence. Now, the monkeys aren't consciously aware that they are wired to other monkeys' brains. They don't have to know that. They are actually just getting the information and perceiving it intuitively. Diversity. With chips in their brain. Each of these.
Oh, you gotta stop it! It loops.
That is as matrix as you can get.
Yeah.
Quite honestly, real. Doctor, that is as matrix mentality as you can get. The fact that the monkeys, and granted, you could do the same thing with humans. You do not have to let them know that they are part of a hive mind experiment. You do not have to let that. They will go about their business. They will consider it frustrating that they can't move it by themselves. Okay. But when they start talking on the neural network, and they start group lifting together, and I'm doing this part, and I'm doing what I'm told, and they're doing what they're told, and they're doing what they're told, we all move it together without realizing that we are cooperating.
Correct. Sorry, that was my evil laugh.
That's a somewhat disturbing reality. Because that shows the fact that through subtle manipulation, we can be made to be part of an outcome whether we realize it or not.
Correct. And we always want to think we are in control, autonomous, free will beings. But perhaps that was an untrue assumption to begin with for mankind.
Well, and you know, we've had the conversation numerous times with Jason McClellan, with Nathaniel Gillis, Archbishop James Cloud, about the fact of relinquished consent.
Ooh.
About the fact of could something be using the idea that, let's say, for instance, there is, and this is just a thought experiment, there is an entity living out in the woods. I'm a Sasquatch hunter. I'm open to Sasquatch. Totally cool with it. Would love to meet a Sasquatch. Out there hunting for him actively. Now, there's not a Sasquatch out there, but there's this other thing that can feel and knows the fact that I'm comfortable with Sasquatch. So what does it do? It hijacks my comfortability and appears to me as a Sasquatch.
Yeah.
So almost the same kind of illusion, because of the fact that you have given the consent to see that thing by your want of the other. Yeah. And now the other is using that consent to hijack and ride in.
Okay. So again, where do you begin and the other ends? It's, you know. Yeah. The sense of self will be blurred in the future significantly. And this selfishness that we have as humans generally, we're born with that. All animals are. It's part of
sure.
life.
It's self-preservation.
Yeah.
Selfishness is self-preservation, nothing less.
DNA program, that's part of it. But as we evolve technologically, either through mind-machine melding or through culture or whatever it may be, that sense of self is going to be blurred. Your children are part of you. You feel that.
Yeah.
And they are part of your DNA, but it's going to extend past that to your species, the earth, the other animals here, the entire ecosystem, everything. You will be able to feel the earth as one.
And we are, I think, as a people, as a humanity, we're in a scattered place mentally right now. There's a lot that we have to. I think that I'm not going to say we need to teach the world to sing and all have a Coke, but we definitely have some things that we need to sort out, as people.
Yes.
To be open to that, to be open to that idea that we are a cog in that universal machine, that we are a neuron in the great hive mind, and that even what we think affects that area, affects that localized area.
Yeah.
No different than if you have given the dopamine rush of addiction to a brain, when that brain is in similar circumstance of that dopamine rush, it will want that dopamine rush.
Yeah.
Because it liked the dopamine.
So it kind of will lead into the next topic of religion and money. Money's the oldest religion.
Oh, sure.
And so we all, just as humans, are indoctrinated. We must seek more of it because it feels good. So it's a dopamine.
Feels great to belong.
Yeah, it feels great to belong. Dopamine rush, have influence and power through promissory notes, and backed by war, not maybe oil, although that's decreasing, no gold. But we need it. It's necessary while we have bodies as a trading instrument for promissory notes. But I see in the future where that will not be necessary, that we will be, I want to put a positive spin on this. We'll be satisfied and happy, not to quote Klaus Schwab, of owning nothing and you'll be happy, but we will be content for optimizing our human potential for a good job well done and for the whole, and that sounds like a Marxist sort of philosophy, but the problem with Marxism in the past is we are sinful creatures. My framework is the 7 deadly sins. That's how you manipulate people. And we're full of them. And I try to rid myself of the 7 deadly sins. Every morning I read them and I'm like, do I have too much of pride? Do I have too much greed? Do I have any jealousy, or am I sloth-like, or am I, I go through them all. And it's important to understand what you are as a creature. And, we're animals. But I honestly think there is a cataclysmic evolutionary event happening right now, as one of my professors, Stephen Jay Gould, said, that happens every so often. This one's technological or cultural, not due to asteroids hitting the Earth or dinosaurs or whatever.
Or the Black Plague or
the Black Plague or something like that. That we are going to have to come to grips with or control our animal instincts in some sort of fashion. And what that looks like, I don't know if that's a brain implant, a chip, or, in order for you to get a quick education and be able to go into with the workforce, they'll find a means, a medical, like the vaccine, they'll find a means that everyone will want it. And that is how the transition will occur. Now, some will become beasts and remain in the animal, what we are now, modern man. Sure. Some will ascend towards what I call the gods, never become a god, but go that direction, men of the mind. That's kind of my philosophy.
Yeah.
About how the human species will bifurcate.
Well, and, that number one makes a lot of sense. My wife and I regularly have the conversation about the fact of the split of humanity and how the pendulum swings across generations, and how there's eventually a pushback the other direction.
The yin, the yang.
And it's really interesting to see that. And right now we are very much in the middle of that pendulum swing. We are right at the point of momentum, ready to swing into something. Yeah. As Art Bell put it all the time, the quickening is upon us. There's something happening that the realm of technology is growing faster and faster. And once again, I don't want to stymie science. I don't want to stymie scientists. I don't want to necessarily,
as long as it's not in secret. That's my only issue.
Absolutely.
It should not be secret.
Absolutely. There's no reason. I really don't think that with any technology we have that there's any reason whatsoever for an invasive process for that kind of work. For brain machine interface, anything like that, I do not think that there is a necessity for a jack in the back of our head anymore.
Okay, there isn't, but that's the thing. It's still invasive in the sense we can control you through electromagnetic fields because you are an electromagnetic being, but it doesn't have to be a chip in your head anymore. And that's the problem that people don't. That's the leap of faith that people don't understand the science of.
Yeah. Well, and I think that is also the leap that a lot of people, that's the stumbling block for a lot of people of understanding that these other things already exist. The dream reading already exists. The fact that if they wanted to put a Mountain Dew commercial in my dream next week, they could do it. They could do it.
Yep.
Like they could pump a Mountain Dew commercial into my dream every night.
Coca-Cola commercials, but
you know,
Mountain Dew,
whatever, man. It could be done now. And I think the stumbling block for a lot of people for getting there, though, Dr. Duncan, is the fact that we don't have full machine brain interface yet. We don't like the monkeys that went through the stuff down the road in Bastrop with Neuralink, who, you know, Elon's going through a little bit of stuff with right now, PETA-wise and government-wise, because of what these monkeys were apparently put through, and what happened to some of them, and the regular results that kept happening, and the fact that kept happening. Despite the results. Try it again.
That's how I view targeted individuals that you talked about on your show quite often. And that they're a larger human experimentation. Havana syndrome is part of that. I mean, this show is not supposed to be about that, so I'm not going to bring up
but that technology is there.
Yes.
That technology is there. And to ignore the fact that it exists is a disservice. It's a disservice just to the thought process and to the thought experiment, because you're omitting information. You're omitting points of datum from the data set.
That is a form of lying through omission, or reframing. You know, that's why I haven't watched television in 6-7 years. You know, I try to keep my finger on the pulse of, you know, what people are thinking, but it's always what they saw on television to tell them what their opinion is the night before. And
I watched some programming. You know, I will admit, you know, I watched some history, some Oak Island, things like that. But I do not watch the news.
No.
I consume my news from didactic sources, red and blue, here in the United States, both sides and the middle. And then I normally read a couple of sources outside frequently, because you're in the Curious Realm group. You see the stuff I post. Frequently, there will be somebody like, hey, you posted this article a couple hours ago from somebody else. And it's like, yes, that's the idea, is third-party confirmation.
Exactly.
Here it is here's the same story being confirmed from another source that has a different thought form. And that's important. It is important to be willing to see that data. And,
you know, I do like your name now, Curious Realm, because you have to have an open mind in order to, if you really want to know the truth, or you can live the matrix, the life of lies, and go on, have some kids, and drive your Subaru, and die uneventful, and hope your kids do something amazing. I don't know. Maybe that was pretty harsh. I don't know.
Chapter 4. Like, Chapter 4. Okay. That's it. You know, and it's not to get dire with the conversation. I saw you earlier posting about how you were in a very serious mood today and you were trying to lighten things up. I'm not trying to take things down a super serious rabbit hole, but there are some things to consider whenever you're thinking about a non-local reality, whenever you're thinking about yourself in the world of the grand illusion, the agreed upon illusion. You know, once again, you have to remember that you can revoke your consent from the system.
Yeah.
You can revoke your consent to the illusion. You can revoke your anger from something because you've chosen to be angry.
Yes. Yes. See, now you're talking about self-control self-awareness and the neocortex. So, we evolved the neocortex. The CIA has a weapon system called REHIC, remote or radio frequency hypnotic inner cerebral control. But you always, if you know thyself, you will know what is you and what is not you. And you should have the power and autonomy to fight the oppressive external forces and to be who you truly want to become. And if you want to be the devil and you want to be evil, hey, do it. Be the best you can. But if you want to be good and you want to help the species continue for the reason that all our ancestors, suffered for us to even experience this, then you will choose the good side of life and inform people and let them make their own decisions. And that's why we're here, Chris.
Oh, absolutely.
Is people need to be informed, and that's it. And they need to think, and sometimes they need to be jostled out of their comfort zone.
Yeah. Well, and to be reminded that you have a decision, and even inaction is a decision.
Yes, it is.
I'm not saying go. This is no call to action, no nothing like that. Other than a call to action in your own life to, hey, think about your place. Think about what you're doing. Think about the fact that you don't have to make waves. All you need to make is a ripple.
Yes, and that's chaos theory. And a small butterfly flapping its wings in China can cause a hurricane in the U.S. So yes, every action matters, and every word, and I call it God's whisper, matters.
It is so interesting to have this conversation with somebody with your credos, with the letters behind your name that you do in the field that you have it, because it's I know you waving me off, but it's interesting to me because I am a former seminary student. These are the things that we sat around and talked about over a beer in the seminary and in philosophy class, things like that. And to hear it from, somebody who came out of an MIT lab, who worked for the alphabet agencies, doing algorithmic work, doing other work, data gathering work, stuff like that, quite literally helping them tame a demon. And when you found out what exactly everything you were working on was being used for, you left.
Yeah, it broke my heart. I'll admit, I went through 7 stages of grief.
Man, there's got to be 22 with that. When you're talking about literally what you have devoted your life to do, Robert.
Yeah.
And then you find out that it has been usurped and used in that way. That is soul crushing.
It is. That'll be the title of my next book. Soul crushing.
Well, I mean, literally, because you had what, and this is the caveat I give to anybody going out there for science degrees, for laboratory work, that kind of stuff. Go do your work. But remember and research thoroughly where that money comes from.
Yeah. And here's, a lot of people have taken on my words since I initially spoke them, but all technology can be used for good or evil.
Absolutely.
And so even fire. Oh, well,
a hammer.
Fire. Yeah. Hammer. It can build buildings and keep you warm and sheltered, or it can crush someone's skull in, And you got to imagine the military is going to use the technology first, like the atomic bomb for atomic energy. It's just the way we humans are built in fear. We always fear what we don't know, and so we must kill it.
Well, and any military theorist will tell you a good defense is The best defense is a good offense.
Oh, and that's why I hate the name.
And having your best foot forward in offensive weaponry, things like that, because then people typically don't want to jack with you.
Yeah. Yeah. No,
you know,
true.
And yeah, you know, even whenever we play the Lockheed Martin atomic video, whenever we have Mike Turber on, we play that regularly, and this is the research that led to that small platform reactor. This video came out in like 2011.
Yeah,
and the reactor was behind the guy, like size of my room reactor. That's a pretty small reactor to be working with to begin with.
Yeah.
Like even Big Black, the original reactor was like 20 times the size of that, you know? So it's interesting to have seen him talking about that and then saying like, we can 4 or 5 generation this every year.
Yeah.
By the time I'm done with this project, I'll need to find a new job. Yeah. Like I won't even be retired. This ain't even work I'll be doing in my retirement. Like, I'll be done with this in a few years. I got to find a new project.
Yeah.
And now, yeah, they're talking about something that is the size of a common desk, you know, that is a nuclear reactor and able to do everything a full-on reactor can do. That is incredible.
I don't mean to change the subject, but what do you think about global warming and fusion reactors now past break-even?
You know, I believe we are absolutely in the midst of a Earth cycle. There is global warming. Global warming exists. We cannot deny that. I mean, temperatures raise, temperatures cool, things change all the time. We contribute to that cycle, most definitely. I also think and know nuclear power is one of the cleanest forms of power that we have.
Okay,
hands down and period.
You got to be careful. Nuclear fusion.
Yeah.
Fission is not. Fusion is clean.
Yes. And you know, right now, once again, seeing what just came out of Lawrence Livermore Labs. That is the first 1.5 times they got a 50% increase.
Yeah. Isn't that to me?
That is the first measure, not just the first measurable increase. That is a massive.
Humanity. That is so huge.
It's a massive increase.
More people aren't talking about it.
A half-fold increase.
Yeah.
Like that is massive because before there's never been an increase. They had sustained reaction. They had things that happened, but it never got more power than what they put in.
That's right.
They never achieved more. It's not that they didn't achieve fusion. It's they didn't achieve fusion that was actively worth a damn.
Exactly.
Like we confuse things, but then it kind of sputters out.
No, I hope this isn't like cold fusion. You know that it turns out there.
No. It's not cold fusion.
This is a major breakthrough just in time.
I will show you the actual patent here because the one thing me and Mike Turber talk about regularly is the fact of they very carefully refer to what are the lasers as heat injectors.
137.
Which you know, if you look at the patent and the design there, you can obviously see like that is where the lasers converge onto the pellet and are maintained between the two coils to maintain that reaction. So, but it's just funny to me how they call the lasers heat injectors.
I'm not sure.
I guess technically it is an optical pump. So they by all definition are within the realm.
Yeah.
It is a pump, so it is an injector.
It is.
But it's remarkable to see these things and to know that once again, anything that we're seeing right now, like they've been working on that and working on that and working on that. We already have proven teleportation in labs.
Yeah. To almost the virus scale.
Yeah.
Teleportation. So now I know we're going a little sideways on the topic, but we can hypothetically teleport viruses into any other country then. You know?
Sure.
I remember I was a weapons designer, and evil uses before the good uses.
Well, and it's also the fact of you think it's off topic. It's really not. It's really not, because we're talking about living in the Matrix. And when you're talking about living in the Matrix, you're talking about like being able to change a swath with a move, with a single move.
Tiny little move.
And we can do that.
The domino right and the chain reaction.
We can do that. We can do that socially.
Mm-hmm.
Like the prime example that I give people all the time is Facebook.
Yeah.
Got their primary funding from In-Q-Tel.
Yeah.
One of their first rounds of funding.
I'm not supposed to say this, but I worked on it before they were a company. But,
and quite literally, it was because it was a social media platform. If you remember, one of the first big things that happened with Facebook was that's what started the overthrow of Hosni Mubarak in the Arab Spring.
You're right. I forgot about that.
They never found that dude that was like, let's all go to the town square and overthrow the government.
Yeah.
They never found that guy. But a whole power structure changed in the Middle East because of a social media post.
And because, I mean, look at what Twitter, Elon Musk has done, is exposing how we ourselves are psyops by our own.
It doesn't take the great majority. And that's, I think, another problem, much like people's hurdle to getting to, they can't control my dreams because, well, they can't even get a monkey brain interface right. They don't have to have something in your brain to make it happen.
Right.
You don't have to have control of 85% of the populace to have an overwhelming reaction. All you need is 5%. That's all you need. Yeah. You need control of 5 to 8% of people. That's
or even less. According to Department of Intelligence Agency report that I read, and this is back in the 70s. Now, you got to remember that anything we say the Russians are doing, we do it better.
Oh, absolutely.
So I'm going to preface it with that. But the Russians had a theory that if they could control 10,000 of our citizens, and we'll assume they're influence leaders, that they could control and steer the direction of the United States. And so that's even less than 5%.
3.5.
Yeah.
There it is right there from BBC Future.
Yeah.
The 3.5% rule, how that a small minority can change the world. And that's just it. And I think that is part of the illusion that we are busy living, Dr. Duncan, is the fact that we are lost in this state of illusory depression.
Yeah.
And just being okay being lost as a society because what are we supposed to do? Like if 80% of us don't change, there won't be a change. There doesn't have to be an 80%. You don't have to convince everybody of your paradigm.
Yeah, as long as people are barely surviving, they won't have a revolution. That's kind of the period.
Quite honestly, you can boil that 3.5% right down to the fact of, hey, we technically only have to agree on 3.5% of stuff to get something done.
Yeah. Yeah, I know.
So look at it that way. That is a hugely, both of those hugely positive things to think about.
Yeah. When you look at humans, first we look at them as neurons. Now let's look at them as chemical reactions.
Oh, please.
At the 30-foot level or whatever from an airplane. And we can direct what those reactions do. If you don't personalize every human, and just through the minor stuff of 3.5%, the rest of them will take on their opinions or ignore it because they're too busy surviving in their own personal lives or whatever it may be. And you're completely right. People think the general populace, they're not the ones listening to this show, but think that we are not deviant to create these kind of psyops on them. They don't believe that. And it's like, this is how all kingdoms work.
People like my wife that I told you about, that she does not believe that there is enough cohesive cooperation amongst humanity to pull off something so nefarious.
Yeah.
Not enough people can get along for that long to high. And the one I bring up all the time to caveat that and to be like, well, I don't know. The GE workers who were busy building detonators and parts for Los Alamos.
Yeah.
That for almost a decade had no idea what the hell they were building. They went in every day. I build this thing. What's that do? No idea. I'm in this department, and I pump out 200 of them a day. That's what I do.
Money, you can feed your kids, and you got a roof over your head.
And all they knew is they built that.
Question.
They like my grandmother was one of the people that went and like worked in the factories in World War II, stuff like that. And hey, she went in, she did her riveting thing, then she came out.
That's right.
And that's what she did. Well, she didn't care what happened in the other building. She didn't know what happened in the other building. She went in. She was keeping her head down and doing her thing because that's what she was there to do.
I'm going to even give a more extreme example. So we interviewed Nazi Germany town people near the concentration camps. And they, after World War II, and they would say, oh, we smelled something funky, but we dare not question because they created jobs. And that's exactly compartmentalization.
And that's just it. You know, we have in numerous cases, prime example, feel free to go check out MK Ultra. Feel free to go check out that nice town in Canada that was experimented on, all kinds of things. We cannot put it past any of them or any scientists or to play fast and loose, so to speak. And once again, I don't want to discourage science, but we have to be careful for the motivations. We have to be careful for the reasonings, not just should this tech exist, you know, because I'm not against any technology. It's the uses of it. It's how can we safeguard against the abuses of it?
Yeah.
You know,
it's always secret. The abuses come first. We got to be careful. And you're going to make me tear up because this is an important conversation.
It is.
We got to wake people up and ask the hard questions. Don't say, well, I trust my government. These men who have power would never be corrupted by it. No, come on. Be honest. You too would be corrupted by that kind of power. You know?
It'd be hard not to be. Be hard not to be. You know, I mean, you're hard pressed to find a senator or a congressman that doesn't leave office with an extra comma and some zeros. That's all I can say. That's all I can say. And it ain't off their salary.
Yes, that's right.
You know, so
I won't mention names, but I have a few names.
We've made the joke for years, and as have many other people in the world. That they should just wear NASCAR jackets.
Yes, definitely.
Just patches,
definitely.
DuPont.
Yeah, who owns you? Who are your owners?
GE, Koch brothers. Yeah. P&G. Who are the people that are funding you? And are funding your decision.
Your own favors too, and that's your circle and blah blah blah. Yeah.
It's interesting that this even comes to this point, because whenever we typically have the TI conversation, especially with John Hall, a lot of people get upset because it goes to a political stint. And like he says, unfortunately, that's because the answer is political.
Yeah.
And very much it's the same way with this. It took a long time of a lot of conversation, Dr. Duncan, for us to get to the point of somebody in Congress going, hey, wait a minute. I sit on that committee. Where the hell those videos come from?
Yeah, exactly. That's right. Remember,
How come I didn't see those videos before they hit CNN with this guy?
Yeah. That's all they care about is, my image is ruined now. I wasn't on top of the ball.
And now there are questions, and now there are panels, and now there are investigatory things going on. And we have to do the same thing with this. We have to open the conversation. And we have to open the conversation because if we don't, by the time it happens, it's too late. You cannot unpull the string. The string is already woven. Like it's tied up, it's ready to pull. And that is what I think most people don't realize when it comes to transhumanity, what have you.
They don't know it yet.
We are square up against it. And that doesn't scare me. I'm not fearing a Skynet situation, anything like that. Now, you, with your experience in your realm of knowledge, do you fear a Skynet situation, Doctor? Do you fear us basically giving AI control and AI kind of going Matrix and going like, no, you're a disease?
Well, look at the calculator was probably the first thing we offloaded in our skill set, or handwriting. Kids these days don't know how to do arithmetic because we got a machine to do it. I wrote a program when I was 12 years old that could beat me at chess. And so I offloaded that. I'm like, I'm never playing chess again.
Yeah, what's the point of this?
I wrote an algorithm to beat that.
I've already figured out how to beat myself without even being there.
So the question really is, we're giving up part of our minds and brains to machines slowly. The question is, will we replace that part of our brain bandwidth with more creative and interesting thoughts to save humanity and our Earth and everything else that we deem important? Or will we succumb to the evolution of the man-machine interface?
Well, and even the fact of that the fact of technology making things so easy that we just stop.
Well, that's gluttony and sloth.
But don't put it past us now.
No, I'm not.
I mean, don't get me wrong. I hold out good hope too, but don't put it past us.
No, I do not.
No, like movies like Replicant, stuff like that, where people have full on. I mean, even right now, we're talking about people. Even the quandary that we have of the actual Matrix, like metaverse, that's out there right now, where you can go and you can have an avatar and everything else. We are dealing with the same social conundrums. We're dealing with people getting groped in virtual reality, man.
And causing
we're dealing with
psychological damage.
Yeah, we're dealing with no less than virtual rape going on.
No, I heard about that.
And you have to think about that because this is the cusp. Right there. The metaverse is very much the cusp of that merge, that regular daily merge of stepping into another world and being somewhere else. And it takes me back a lot because I'm a kid of the late 70s, born in 75. I had a computer that had a turbo button on it in high school. 256 it went to for gaming. It was intense.
Wow, that's impressive.
That was hardcore in '93, man. That was, to see the leaps of technology that have happened just in my lifetime. To see movies like Lawnmower Man in '92. I love that movie. But man, I go out to events like CES. Like I'd typically be headed out there right now. Unfortunately, my 2 weeks of work stomps all over my CES. So no free CES for me this year. No week of cool technology. But man, the stuff that I see for VR and people flying and everything else, it's literally the exact stuff from that movie.
Okay. Is it addictive? Is my question.
I can't imagine. I cannot imagine that it wouldn't be any more than an addictive mind can be. Like, I had a cousin at one point. I played Magic pretty hardcore, the card game, and I had a cousin of mine that was like, Chris, I can't believe with the way you are with computers and with the way you are with Magic that you don't play World of Warcraft, that you don't play like Warhammer, that kind of stuff.
Sure.
And I put my hand down and I went to get a beer and I was like, I pointed at my little cousin Ricky and I was like, Ricky, take it over. And he was like, if Chris played World of Warcraft, he'd never do anything else.
Yeah, he would never come back.
That would be what he did.
Yeah.
So he doesn't play World of Warcraft.
So Meta, let's say Meta actually does catch on, which I'm scared about.
I'm sure a version of it will.
And we all have IVs in our lazy boy chairs with our poop chutes on them and everything else, like Idiocracy.
Yeah.
Do you like that movie?
I was watching Oh My Balls.
Yeah, we could become that kind of society.
We're steps away. We're steps away. We just had a wrestler for a president.
Yes.
Don't forget. Our previous president was a WWE wrestler for a stint. So
I interviewed with Jesse Ventura. Remember, he was governor in Minnesota.
but yeah, and that's just it. Like it's interesting to see the point that we are teetering on as a humanity when it comes to technology. We are burgeoning on so much, on such an incredible world, but at the same time, my God, we're still such momos, Doctor.
Yes.
Still such absolute simpletons.
Yes. Technology has advanced further than our cultural evolution to control it.
Yeah.
And that is the danger that we are in now. That we can destroy ourselves 1,000 times over with different weapon systems.
Oh God, yeah. We could split this world in half 18 waves.
Yeah. And, we can control all minds now. And so what is free will, religion, justice, everything that we were born with to believe will be thrown out of the window. And now where are we left with? What is our meaning? Where do we come from? Where are we going? So people are kind of in this lost state. They feel this, they know this, but they want an answer of direction. And I'm only an educator. I'll tell them what is, but I do not want to tell them where to go. That is something they must decide.
You can only lead them to the water.
Yeah.
Can only lead them to water. You can only be like, there is the window. Feel free to hop in or out.
Yeah. Yeah. Hop in or out. The windows are open.
Well, and
the door may be locked. I don't know.
To loop the conversation back around before we wrap up, Doctor, it really is that importance of realizing that you're a neuron in the great brain, that you are a cog in the machine of the universe, and that you have that power of consent. You have the power to revoke consent from the system.
Or
like you don't have to have an argument. You don't.
That's right.
That is an option.
But you can always expand your mind if you're not fearful.
That's right.
You can learn new things and become one with the universe.
Yeah, most definitely. Most definitely. Doctor, I want to thank you for your time. I've seen, like I told you in our private message, I've seen you on social media lately, and it seems like you've been really, really wanting to have this conversation.
I did.
Like out loud. And that's why I contacted you, because I was like, it really seems like you've got something to say about this, and I want you to have a platform to say it. Always.
You're too kind.
Any time things like this are on your mind, because it's always a great conversation. And once again, we as a people need to be ready to have this conversation. It's not a comfortable one. It's not a comfortable one. You have to be ready to admit the fact that you are a Neanderthal brain reactionary human being in this conversation.
Yeah.
And that's hard to accept.
You know, a mind once stretched never regains its original shape, but the stretching process may hurt a little.
That's right. Well, let everybody know where they can go to. Oh my God, where'd they go? Where they can go to pick up your books. How to Tame a Demon and Project Soulcatcher.
Amazon or PAX International or something like that.
And of course, the Curious Realm store. You can go there as well.
Well, there you go. Go to the Curious Realm store and pick up my books.
Well, please do hold the line while we close things out. Doctor, I love having you on. I love our conversations. It is always great to hear that there are good people like you out there with this thought form and spreading this thought form and trying to even sans, because I found it important, and I find it important whenever people are not necessarily walking a spiritual path. They aren't like, a Sunday religious, but yet still this is their thought form, because it's the thought form we should be having. It's the thought form that will evolve us as a humanity to where we need to be.
Save us from ourselves. Yes,
indeed. So, please do hold the line while we close things out, Doctor. While you are online finding your copies of the amazing books by Dr. Robert Duncan, make sure to stop on by Curious Realm, folks. That is where you can find the website. That is where you can find the Knowledge Vault full of all of the released government documents that we have, everything from brainwave sync processes to the Matrix Deciphered by Robert Duncan. If you really want to get into some of this thought form, of course, he's writing a new book that will be much more in depth, but this is a great primer to this concept. Stop on by and check that out. Right there in the Curious Realm Knowledge Vault, curiousrealm.com/knowledge. Thank you once again, everybody, for tuning in. I will be back live in studio next week. Thank you so much to Dr. Duncan. Thank you so much to Bill Soukoulas for his wealth of knowledge on Mothman in the beginning of the episode. Thank you so much to everybody for tuning in. Take care of yourselves, take care of each other, and remember, if you can't be good at it. We'll talk to you soon. Bye-bye. Thank you for tuning in to this episode of The Curious Realm. Stay tuned for more guests, forbidden topics, and hidden truths. Download the official Curious Realm app and view the Knowledge Vault on our website, curiousrealm.com. Follow us on social media by searching Curious Realm. Curious Realm is available on your favorite podcast services, as well as YouTube, Roku, Amazon Fire, and Apple TV through the APR TV app, available on all app markets. Curious Realm is a proud member of the HC Universal Network family of podcasts. For more great content or to become a sponsor of Curious Realm or other podcasts, visit hcuniversalnetwork.com today. Thanks for listening. Stay curious. And remember, the other side is always watching.